On the morning of December 6th, 1917, as World War I raged across the Atlantic, a French ship sat in one of the busiest harbors on Earth carrying a top-secret cargo, 6 million pounds of explosives. Few nearby had any idea. But 20 minutes after a small collision, the secret cargo went off in a blast that killed close to 2,000 people. Until the atom bomb, it was the largest explosion ever caused by humans. Listen for the incredible stories of heroism and devastation on the day the world's largest man-made explosion destroyed a city. Disaster Dive is built on researching the science behind the world's worst disasters, with a fresh, deep dive every week. Subscribe so the next one doesn't slip past you. Now, here's how this one started. By the winter of 1917, Halifax had turned into one of the busiest ports in the British Empire. World War I was in its third year, and the city's deep, ice-free harbour made it the main staging point for convoys crossing the Atlantic to Britain and to France. Troop ships, hospital ships, and cargo vessels packed the water day and night. The population had swelled past 60,000 people, trying to keep up with the demands of a wartime economy. Early that Thursday, the French cargo ship Mont Blanc was working her way through the Narrows, the tight channel connecting Halifax's outer harbour to Bedford Basin. She had sailed from New York under Captain Aimé Lemedec. Harbour pilot Francis Mackey guided her through the busy harbour, heading her to join a convoy bound for France. Below deck sat over 6 million pounds of explosives, picric acid, TNT, and gun cotton, with drums of flammable benzene lashed down on the top for extra fuel. Ships carrying cargo like that were normally required to fly a red warning flag, but with German submarines hunting the Atlantic, that rule had quietly been dropped. To anyone watching from the docks, she looked like any other freighter sliding through the morning traffic. At the same time, the Norwegian steamship Imo was pulling out of Bedford Basin under Captain Håkon From, running about a day behind schedule after a delay loading coal. She was empty and riding high in the water, chartered to collect relief supplies in New York, bound for occupied Belgium. To make up the lost time, From pushed her well past the harbor's posted speed limit, and after passing 2 other vessels in the channel, he ended up on the wrong side of the Narrows, the same side the Mont Blanc was using to come in. What no one on either ship, and no one on the docks watching the morning traffic go by, could have guessed was that 2 of the only vessels in that crowded harbor capable of leveling the whole city were now closing in on each other in the one stretch of water too narrow for either of them to turn away. Around 8:45 a.m., the 2 ships spotted each other and tried to avoid a crash. Mackey sounded a single whistle blast, the signal that the Mont Blanc had the right of way. Imo answered with 2 blasts, refusing to yield. Both captains gave last-second orders to change course, and in the confusion they ended up turning toward each other instead of away. Imo's bow struck Mont Blanc's hull at a low speed, barely faster than walking pace, but the impact occurred right where the drums filled with highly flammable benzene sat lashed to her deck. It would have been a minor accident, but for the Mont Blanc's volatile cargo. The barrels toppled and split open, and benzene ran down into the hold below. As Imo's engines pulled her back out of the gash, sparks from the grinding metal hulls ignited the fuel almost instantly. Flames raced across the Mont Blanc's deck within minutes. Lemedec knew exactly what was sitting below those flames, and he ordered his crew into the lifeboats without hesitation. They rowed hard for the Dartmouth shore, shouting warnings the whole way, but no one understood them. The crew only spoke French, and the harbor around them spoke only English. With no one left to steer her, the burning Mont Blanc drifted on the tide until she grounded against Pier 6 in the middle of Halifax's working-class Richmond district. Black smoke poured off the ship, and the docks and streets nearby filled with people drawn outside to watch. Dock workers, soldiers, school children on their way to class, office workers leaning out of upper-story windows, unaware of the burning ship's cargo. None of them had any reason to think this was anything more than a good show. Just a few hundred meters away, one man did understand the danger immediately, and he had only minutes left to do anything about it. Vince Coleman was a railway dispatcher working out of a small wooden depot in the Richmond rail yards, just down the tracks from Pier 6. A sailor sent ashore by a naval officer ran into the depot and told Coleman and his supervisor that the burning ship was loaded with munitions and was about to explode. The two men started for the door. Then Coleman turned back to his telegraph key. He was thinking about train number 10, the overnight passenger express from St. John, New Brunswick, due to pull into the very tracks running past the blazing pier within minutes, carrying close to 300 people. Coleman sat back down and began tapping out a warning to every station between Halifax and Truro. Hold up the train, munitions ship afire, making for Pier 6. Goodbye, boys. He stayed at the quay, sending that message as the fire roared outside his window. The warning reached station after station down the line. Order boards dropped to stop along dozens of miles of track, and the train was held safely outside the danger zone at a station 4 miles short of the harbor. Outside, the crowd along the waterfront was still growing, still watching the fire with no idea of what Coleman already knew. None of them understood that the harbor in front of them was seconds away from disappearing. 9:04 a.m., Mont Blanc's cargo went off. The ship came apart almost instantly. A pressure wave tore outward for a kilometer through the Narrows. The entire Richmond district was flattened in seconds. More than 1,600 buildings were destroyed, and 325 acres of the city were reduced to rubble and ash. People had been standing at their windows watching the fire moments earlier. The blast wave drove that glass straight into their faces, leaving hundreds blinded for life. Scientists later put the energy release at 2.9 kilotons of TNT, about 1/5 of the force of the atomic bomb that would level Hiroshima less than 3 decades later. It remains the largest man-made explosion ever recorded before the atomic age. Windows shattered 50 miles away in Truro. The blast was heard hundreds of miles off. A half-ton piece of Mont Blanc's anchor shaft was later found buried in the ground more than 4 kilometers from the harbor. Half of Emo's crew died in the blast, including Captain Frome. Aboard Mont Blanc, only one sailor was killed, since the rest had already rowed clear. Railway dispatcher Vince Coleman died a hero, sacrificing his own life to ensure his last-minute warning was heard down the rail line. The train he stopped never reached the danger zone, saving hundreds of lives. The explosion didn't just flatten Richmond. It pushed the harbor itself into motion. A wall of water surged out of the Narrows, close to 18 meters high, and rolled across both shores. It tore Emo from where she sat and dropped her, grounded and wrecked, on the Dartmouth side. Directly across the water from Pier 6 sat Turtle Grove, a small settlement of indigenous Mi'kmaq people at Tufts Cove who had lived along that shoreline for generations. Even while the city around it had spent years trying to push the community off the land, the blast and subsequent wave hit Turtle Grove almost as hard as Richmond. Government records at the time counted only 9 dead from the settlement, but oral histories from survivors and their descendants put the real number closer to 30. A Mi'kmaq elder named Jerry Lonecloud lost 2 daughters and one of his own eyes that morning. The settlement was never rebuilt. Survivors were resettled on reserves elsewhere in Nova Scotia, and the shoreline they had lived on for generations was gone for good. Across Halifax and Dartmouth, roughly 25,000 people were left without homes in the space of a single morning. In a city of barely 60,000 people, the small local hospitals were quickly overwhelmed. Doctors who had spent years treating wartime wounds now faced an entire city of trauma cases at once, many of them children, with deep glass wounds to the eyes from watching the fire through the windows. The injuries were severe enough that the disaster became one of the driving forces behind the founding of the Canadian National Institute for the Blind a few years later. Help moved fast. Within hours, relief trains loaded with doctors, nurses, and supplies were rolling toward Halifax from Truro, Amherst, New Glasgow, and other towns across the east coast of Canada. Then, the next morning, a blizzard dumped over a foot of snow onto a city already buried in rubble, slowing every rescue crew and burying survivors who might otherwise have been found in time. Aid kept arriving anyway, from across Canada and from cities throughout the northeastern United States. The relief effort sent from the city of Boston was so large that Nova Scotia has sent that city a Christmas tree every December for over 100 years. A quiet thank you that has now outlasted all who were alive at the time of the blast. Though no one was ever criminally convicted, an inquiry that winter pinned the blame entirely on the Mont Blanc. Her captain, Le Medec, harbor pilot Francis Mackey, and a Navy commander in charge of harbor defenses were all arrested on manslaughter charges. A judge later threw out the case for lack of evidence. Mackey escaped with his life, but the harbor authority stripped him of his pilot's license. With a wife and 6 children to support, he spent years and his savings fighting to get it back. It took 2 more rounds of appeals, all the way to a court in London, before judges finally ruled that both ships, not just one, had made the navigational errors that put them on a collision course that morning. The Halifax Explosion Remembrance Book lists 1,782 names. Most historians believe the true toll was closer to 2,000, since whole neighborhoods, Turtle Grove among them, were never fully accounted for in the official record. Richmond itself was eventually rebuilt as Hydrostone, a planned neighborhood of fireproof concrete homes along tree-lined boulevards, often called Canada's first public housing project. Halifax still remembers December 6th every year, with a service at the Bell Tower in Fort Needham Park, not far from where the Mont Blanc came apart. For nearly 3 decades, this event held the record for the most destructive explosion human beings had ever caused. In August 1945, 2 cities on the other side of the world found out exactly how much further mankind's destructive power could go. Thank you for listening all the way through. Stories like this deserve more than a passing mention, and that's why the Disaster Dive team keeps digging into them. If this story impacted you the same way it did us, drop a comment below. Every like, comment, and subscribe helps these stories reach people who have never heard them. Take care of each other, and see you in the next Disaster Dive.